Picture this. You stand at the edge of a darkened tomb, torchlight flickering against walls covered in strange symbols. The air is thick with the scent of incense and the weight of centuries. Before you lies a papyrus scroll, its edges worn by time, the very same scroll that once guided pharaohs through the shadows of death. This is not just a book. This is the key to eternity. The ancient Egyptians called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day, but you may know it as the Book of the Dead. Within these sacred texts lie spells to outwit demons, passwords to unlock celestial gates, and rituals to cheat oblivion itself. For 3,000 years, these secrets were guarded by priests, buried with kings, and whispered only to the worthy. Today, we crack open that wisdom. 50 hidden truths, 50 revelations from beyond the grave, each one a thread in the tapestry of the afterlife. From the terrifying weighing of the heart ceremony to the forbidden names of underworld guardians, from the magic amulets that animated mummies to the chilling fate of those who failed the gods' judgment, we're about to walk the path of the dead together. Will you join the journey? The Duat awaits. Now let's uncover the first secret, the real name of the Book of the Dead. To the ancient Egyptians, this sacred text wasn't about death at all. They called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day, a title bursting with hope and movement. Think of it as a divine guidebook designed to help the soul navigate the afterlife's twists and turns, not a grim manual for the end. The modern name, Book of the Dead, actually misses the mark. It was coined by early European explorers who saw these scrolls tucked into tombs and assumed they were all about mourning. But the Egyptians had a brighter vision. This was a roadmap to rebirth, filled with spells to dodge demons, charms to win over gods, and even passwords to slip past underworld gatekeepers. And here's something fascinating. This book didn't appear out of nowhere. It evolved from two much older collections of spells, the pyramid texts carved into royal tomb walls around 4,000 years ago, and the coffin texts painted onto middle-class coffins centuries later. The Book of the Dead took these traditions and made them portable, personal. No longer just for pharaohs or nobles, ordinary Egyptians could now afford papyrus copies to take with them into eternity. So when you hear Book of the Dead, remember it's really a book of life, a promise that dawn always follows the darkest night. Now let's move deeper into the mysteries of the Book of the Dead with a secret that gave the deceased an edge in the afterlife: the power of knowing the gods' names. In ancient Egypt, names weren't just labels, they held the very essence of a being. To know a deity's true name was to wield influence over them, a crucial advantage when navigating the perilous journey through the underworld. Imagine standing before a towering gate guarded by a fearsome god. Without the right knowledge, you'd be turned away, or worse, but whisper their secret name and suddenly the path opens. This wasn't just superstition, it was rooted in the Egyptian concept of Heka, the life force that powered all magic. Heka was the invisible energy that made spells work, and words were its fuel. Many spells in the Book of the Dead are essentially elaborate name-dropping exercises. For instance, Spell 39 teaches the deceased how to address the 42 judges of the underworld, each by name and title, proving their worthiness to pass. Another spell, number 148, lists the 7 celestial cows and their bull. Knowing their names ensured the dead would never go hungry in the afterlife. But here's the twist: the gods weren't fooled easily. Simply reciting names wasn't enough. The deceased had to prove they understood the deity's nature and realm. It was like a cosmic password system where the right words unlocked divine favor. This belief in the power of names extended beyond the gods. Demons, gates, even the hours of the night had secret names, and mastering them meant safety, while ignorance could mean oblivion. So when we read these spells today, we're glimpsing an ancient survival guide where knowledge wasn't just power, it was the difference between eternal life and eternal silence. Now let's step into one of the most dramatic moments in the Egyptian afterlife, the weighing of the heart ceremony. Picture this: you've navigated the underworld's dangers, recited the gods' names, and now you stand in the Hall of Two Truths, facing the ultimate test. Your heart, believed to hold every deed you've ever committed, is placed on a golden scale. On the other side, the feather of Maat, symbolizing truth and cosmic order. This is spell 125, the make-or-break moment of the soul's journey. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification, oversees the scales with unwavering precision. His role isn't just ceremonial, he ensures the weighing is flawless, free from any trickery. Beside him stands Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, ready to record the verdict. And then there's Ammit, the terrifying hybrid of lion, hippo, and crocodile, lurking nearby. If your heart tips the scale, if it's heavier than Maat's feather, Ammit doesn't just kill you. She devours your soul, erasing you from existence in what the Egyptians called the second death. But how did the dead tip the scales in their favor? Enter the negative confession, a list of 42 declarations where the deceased proclaims their innocence to each judge of the underworld. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not caused pain. These weren't just denials, they were affirmations of a life lived in harmony with Maat's principles. And here's the clever part: the Book of the Dead provided these confessions as a script, ensuring the deceased wouldn't falter under pressure. It was the ultimate cheat sheet for purity, blending morality with magic. What's fascinating is how this ceremony mirrors real-life Egyptian values. A light heart wasn't just about avoiding evil, it reflected a life of balance, generosity, and respect for the divine. Survive this trial and you'd earn the title True of Voice, granting you passage to the field of reeds. Fail, and Ammit's jaws awaited. No wonder this spell was among the most copied in the Book of the Dead. It wasn't just a test. It was the gateway to eternity. But surviving the weighing of the heart was only half the battle. The ancient Egyptians feared something far worse than physical death, the terrifying prospect of a second death, the complete annihilation of one's existence in the afterlife. Imagine spending your life preparing for eternity, only to vanish forever, your name erased, your soul dissolved into nothingness. This wasn't just an abstract fear. It shaped everything from burial rituals to the very spells woven into the Book of the Dead. To prevent this fate, the Egyptians developed powerful magical safeguards, spells specifically aimed to preserve both the body and the name of the deceased, because without them, the soul had no anchor in the afterlife. That's why mummification wasn't just about respecting the dead. It was a sacred act of preservation, ensuring the physical form remained intact so the soul could recognize and return to it. Meanwhile, tomb inscriptions served a dual purpose. They weren't merely decorative but vital declarations of identity. Every carved hieroglyph of a name was a lifeline, shouting into eternity, "I existed and I still do." Some of the most poignant spells in the Book of the Dead focus on this very fear. There were incantations to make the name live, rituals to cause the bar to remember, and even defenses against demons who sought to steal or erase names from the underworld's records. Because in Egyptian belief, to forget someone's name was to destroy them twice over. This explains why pharaohs went to such lengths to chisel their names into stone across the land, and why enemies would later try to hack those names away, attempting a kind of spiritual murder. The irony: while the wealthy could afford elaborate tombs and scrolls stuffed with protective spells, even the poorest Egyptians found ways to guard against the second death. Simple steals with names, humble offerings to the gods, all were attempts to cheat oblivion, because in the end, whether you were a king or a farmer, the greatest terror wasn't dying. It was being forgotten. Now let's uncover one of the Book of the Dead's most fascinating secrets: the power to shapeshift into animals. Picture this: navigating the afterlife not as a vulnerable human soul, but as a falcon soaring above danger, a serpent slithering past hostile spirits, or even a lotus flower blooming anew each dawn. These transformations weren't just poetic metaphors, they were survival tactics etched into sacred spells. The Egyptians believed certain animals held divine protections or supernatural advantages. Take the falcon, linked to Horus, god of kingship and the sky. By reciting the right spell, the deceased could borrow his keen vision and speed to evade underworld demons. Other spells promised the stealth of a snake, a creature revered for its ability to move unseen, perfect for slipping past the Duat's many guardians. Even the humble lotus had its role, symbolizing rebirth as it closed each night and reopened with the sun. To become a lotus was to tap into that cyclical renewal, ensuring one's soul could rise again. But why risk these metamorphoses? Sometimes it was pure necessity. Demons lurked in the underworld, hungry for souls unprepared for their trials. Transforming into an animal might mean dodging the eater of the dead, or confusing lesser spirits with an unfamiliar form. Other times it was about ambition. The Book of the Dead reveals spells where the dead sought to merge with powerful deities by taking their sacred animal shapes, like becoming the crocodile-headed Sobek to wield his strength or the ibis of Thoth to gain his wisdom. What's striking is how these spells blurred the line between human and divine. They weren't just about hiding or escaping, they were about transcending. A farmer who'd never held power in life could, in death, become a lion to roar down enemies, or a heron like the celestial Bennu bird to claim rebirth. This was magic at its most liberating, the ultimate equalizer in a realm where status from Earth meant little and ingenuity meant everything. And here's the twist: these animal forms weren't permanent. They were tools donned like armor for specific challenges. A soul might shed one shape for another as easily as changing clothes, adapting to each new threat or opportunity. It reveals a profound truth about the Egyptian afterlife. Survival wasn't just about piety or wealth, but creativity. To outwit the underworld, you had to be willing to become something or someone else entirely. Now let's navigate the treacherous geography of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld that every soul had to cross. Imagine it not as some vague, shadowy realm, but as a meticulously mapped landscape filled with fiery lakes, demon-guarded gates, and regions where the very air could destroy the unprepared. The Book of the Dead served as an ancient GPS for this journey, with spells acting as turn-by-turn instructions to avoid deadly pitfalls. At the heart of this underworld lay 12 distinct regions, each more perilous than the last. The dead had to pass through caverns of darkness, deserts of scorching wind, and rivers teeming with spectral predators, but the most infamous landmark, the Lake of Fire, a blazing expanse where evil souls faced annihilation. Spells explicitly warned the deceased not to even look at its waters unless they'd first recited the proper charms to cool the flames. Guarding these zones were entities straight out of nightmares. Each of the 12 gates had a unique guardian, some with knives for faces, others with serpents coiled around their limbs. To pass, the dead had to speak each demon's secret name, a trick borrowed from earlier spells we've discussed. Get it wrong and you'd be dragged into the darkness. But the Book of the Dead gave travelers an edge. Exact dialogues to flatter or outwit these beings, like promising the Flaming One a tribute of light or reminding the Slaughterer of your purity. What's fascinating is how these spells functioned as both map and compass. Certain passages describe landmarks like the Field of Offerings or the Mansion of Osiris in such detail that archaeologists suspect they mirror real Egyptian geography, perhaps the Nile's winding path or the layout of sacred temple complexes. This wasn't just mystical poetry, it was a survival guide where knowing the route meant the difference of eternal bliss or oblivion. And here's the genius of it all: the Duat wasn't static. Like the Nile's annual flood, it shifted. Spells mention alternate paths, secret shortcuts used by gods, and even times when entire regions vanished or merged. That's why the Book of the Dead often included multiple versions of the same spell, because flexibility was key. A soul might need one incantation to bypass the lake of knives at dawn and another entirely by nightfall. This hidden map reveals a profound truth about Egyptian beliefs. The afterlife wasn't a passive reward, it was an obstacle course demanding wit, preparation, and the courage to face whatever lurked beyond the next gate. And as we'll soon see, those who mastered these challenges didn't just survive, they ascended. Now let's turn our attention to one of the most pivotal figures in this cosmic journey, Osiris, the god who wears two crowns in the afterlife. While we've seen him presiding over the Duat's grand halls, his story is far more than just rulership. It's a tale of betrayal, resurrection, and ultimately, hope for every soul navigating the underworld. Osiris wasn't always the lord of the dead. Long before he became the judge of the afterlife, he was a beloved king of the living, teaching humanity agriculture and law. But his brother Set, consumed by jealousy, murdered him in a brutal act of treachery, dismembering his body and scattering the pieces across Egypt. Here's where the myth takes a transformative turn. Osiris' wife Isis, with her sister Nephthys, gathered every fragment of his body, weaving them together with spells so powerful that Osiris was reborn, not as a mortal, but as the first mummy and the eternal sovereign of the underworld. This resurrection myth wasn't just a divine soap opera. It became the blueprint for every Egyptian's afterlife aspirations. Just as Osiris triumphed over death, so too could the deceased hope for rebirth by aligning themselves with his story. Spells in the Book of the Dead often invoked Osiris directly, with phrases like, "I am your beloved son," or "Grant me your endurance," blurring the line between the god and the mortal seeking salvation. But Osiris' role had another layer: justice. In the Hall of Two Truths, where hearts were weighed against Mat's feather, he wasn't just a passive observer. As the ultimate judge, he had the final say over who entered the field of reeds. Yet, unlike the vengeful gods of other mythologies, Osiris was remarkably merciful. Even flawed souls could appeal to him through spells confessing their virtues or begging his intercession. One poignant passage describes him as the listener, leaning forward on his throne to hear the pleas of the dead. What's truly fascinating is how Osiris balanced these dual roles. By day, he was the compassionate father, offering solace to those who'd passed his tests. By night, he transformed into the unshakable ruler, keeping chaos at bay so the sun god Ra could safely journey through the underworld. This duality gave Egyptians immense comfort. Death wasn't an end, but a passage overseen by a god who'd endured it himself. And that's the secret hidden in Osiris' green-skinned depiction. His color wasn't just about decay, it symbolized the fertile Nile silt, promising that from death comes renewal. Every mummy wrapped in linen, every heart spell whispered in the dark, was an echo of his victory, proof that even in the Duat's darkest corners, rebirth was possible. Now let's uncover another layer of ancient Egyptian magic: the powerful amulets carefully placed on mummies to guide and protect them in the afterlife. These small but mighty objects weren't just decorative, they were charged with spells and symbolism, acting as divine insurance policies for the soul's journey. The scarab beetle amulet was one of the most important. Carved from stone or molded from faience, it represented the sun god Ra rolling the sun across the sky, just as a scarab rolls dung. But its deeper meaning tied into rebirth. Placed over the mummy's heart, it carried spells to prevent the heart from betraying its owner during the weighing ceremony. Some scarabs even had the Book of the Dead spell 30 inscribed underneath, pleading, "Do not stand against me in judgment." Then there was the Ankh, the iconic looped cross symbolizing eternal life. Often made of gold or red jasper, it was placed in the mummy's hands or near the mouth. The Ankh wasn't just about living forever. It ensured the deceased could breathe, speak, and move freely in the afterlife. Think of it as a supernatural battery keeping the soul's senses active. The jed pillar, resembling a backbone, was another essential. Crafted from blue faience or lapis lazuli, it was tied to the mummy's neck or spine. This amulet echoed Osiris' resurrected body, granting stability and strength. Spells invoked it to raise the dead, ensuring the dead wouldn't collapse in weakness when facing underworld trials. Lesser known but equally vital was the Duat, or knot of Isis. This red stone or glass amulet, shaped like a stylized girdle, was tucked between the mummy's linen wrappings. Linked to Isis' blood and protection, it warded off demons and helped reunite the soul with its body, a nod to how Isis pieced Osiris back together. Priests didn't just toss these amulets randomly onto mummies. Their placement was a sacred science. The Book of the Dead specified exact positions, sometimes even stitching them into linen bands over specific organs. A gold falcon amulet went over the throat to safeguard speech, while 2 fingers of obsidian protected the embalmer's incision. What's remarkable is how these amulets blurred magic and medicine. The Wadjet eye, for example, wasn't just a symbol of Horus' healed eye. It was believed to literally restore damaged flesh in the afterlife. And the 4 sons of Horus amulets guarded the preserved organs in canopic jars, each linked to a cardinal direction and goddess. This wasn't superstition. To the Egyptians, amulets were tools harnessing Heka, the same divine magic that empowered gods. By embedding them in the mummy's wrappings, they created a kind of spiritual armor, ensuring the soul had every advantage against the Duat's dangers. Even the poorest Egyptians included at least a scarab or ankh, proving that in death, as in life, a little divine backup went a long way. Now let's step into one of the most fascinating ceremonies from ancient Egypt, the ritual of opening the mouth. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was a powerful act of magic meant to restore the mummy's senses, ensuring the deceased could see, hear, speak, and even eat in the afterlife. Imagine it as the ultimate spiritual reboot, waking up the soul for its journey beyond. The ceremony centered around a special tool called the adze, a blade shaped like the Big Dipper constellation. Priests would touch this instrument to the mummy's mouth, eyes, ears, and nose, mimicking the moment the gods Horus and Anubis used it to revive Osiris. Each touch came with precise spells from the Book of the Dead, essentially powering up the senses one by one. But the ritual didn't stop there. Priests also used a ceremonial bull's leg to symbolically strike the mummy's mouth, a gesture tied to the myth of Horus breaking his uncle Set's jaw to free his father Osiris. Incense filled the air, and offerings of food and drink were presented not just as tribute, but as a way to activate the mummy's ability to consume them eternally. What's truly remarkable is how this ritual blurred the line between object and living being. The same ceremony was performed on statues of gods in temples, animating them so deities could inhabit their forms. For the Egyptians, the opening of the mouth wasn't just tradition. It was the moment the dead truly crossed over, their senses restored, ready to navigate the unseen world with full awareness. This ritual reveals a profound truth about Egyptian beliefs. Death wasn't an end, but a transformation, one that required careful preparation to ensure the soul arrived whole, capable, and fully alive in every way that mattered. Now let's uncover one of the most perilous challenges in the Egyptian afterlife, the 12 demon gates of the Duat. Picture this: the soul's journey isn't just a straight path but a gauntlet of towering gates, each one protected by a fearsome guardian. These weren't ordinary doors, they were thresholds of terror manned by demons with names like Flaming Face or Eater of Shadows, beings who could snuff out a soul with a single misstep. The Book of the Dead held the key to survival, secret spells that revealed the true names of these gatekeepers. Why? Because in Egyptian magic, knowing a being's name meant power over it. Reciting these names was like whispering a password, proof that the deceased belonged in the sacred realms beyond. Some spells even included flattery, praising the demon's might to win their favor. But the dangers didn't stop at the gates themselves. Fiery blades lined the pathways, and serpentine monsters lurked in the shadows, ready to strike. One wrong move and the soul risked being sliced apart or swallowed whole. That's why the spells also contained vivid descriptions of the underworld's geography, landmarks like the Lake of Fire or the Cavern of Darkness, so the dead could navigate with confidence. What's fascinating is how these gates mirrored the 12 hours of the night, each one marking a deeper descent into the Duat's mysteries. Passing them wasn't just about survival. It was a test of knowledge, courage, and purity. Only those armed with the right words, the right names, could prove they were worthy of Osiris's kingdom. This forbidden knowledge reveals a chilling truth. The afterlife wasn't a peaceful paradise, but a battlefield of wits and will. And for the ancient Egyptians, the difference between eternal bliss and oblivion often came down to a single, well-spoken spell. Now let's turn our attention to another breathtaking spectacle in the Egyptian afterlife, the nightly voyage of Ra's solar bark. Imagine this: as the sun sets, the great god Ra doesn't simply disappear. Instead, he begins a treacherous journey through the 12 hours of the night, navigating the twisting waterways of the Duat in his majestic boat. This wasn't just a celestial event. For the ancient Egyptians, it was a cosmic battle between order and chaos, with Ra's survival ensuring the sunrise would come again. The dead yearned to join Ra on this perilous journey, and the Book of the Dead held the spells to make it possible. By reciting the right incantations, the deceased could secure a place aboard the solar bark, sailing under the protection of the sun god himself. But this privilege wasn't handed out lightly. Ra's boat was a sacred vessel, and only those who had proven their purity in the weighing of the heart ceremony could hope to board it. Of course, the journey was far from safe. The serpent Apophis, embodiment of chaos, lay in wait each night, coiling around the waterways, determined to swallow Ra and plunge the world into eternal darkness. The spells didn't just grant passage, they armed the dead with divine knowledge to help repel Apophis. Some invoked the power of Ra's allies like Seth, who stood at the prow of the boat, spear in hand, ready to strike the serpent down. Others called upon the magic of Isis, whose words could weaken Apophis long enough for the bark to slip past. What's truly remarkable is how these spells mirrored the sun god's own struggle. By joining Ra's crew, the dead weren't just passengers, they became active participants in the battle to keep the universe in balance. Their chants and prayers became weapons against chaos, their presence a testament to their worthiness. And when dawn finally broke, those who had endured the journey emerged reborn, just like Ra, ready to walk in the light of a new day. This secret reveals a profound truth. For the Egyptians, the afterlife wasn't just about reaching paradise. It was about earning the right to stand beside the gods in their eternal fight to keep the world alive. Now let's pull back the veil on one of the most intricate layers of Ra's nightly journey, the secret names of the 12 hours of the night. Each hour wasn't just a measure of time, it was a separate realm of the Duat with its own gods, guardians, and deadly pitfalls. To navigate this gauntlet, the dead had to master the hidden names of each hour, wielding them like keys to unlock safe passage. The first hour, known as the one who repels the serpent, was guarded by the god Jur, the personification of divine perception. Here, the dead faced a maze of darkness where whispers of forgotten souls could lead travelers astray. Reciting the hour's true name summoned a path of faint starlight guiding the way forward. By the fourth hour, the one who cuts through chaos, the solar bark reached the domain of the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet. Flames licked the waters as she tested the dead's resolve. Only those who could speak her secret title, the flame that purifies, were spared her wrath. The seventh hour, the one who subdues the rebel, was ruled by the executioner god Anhefter. His axe hovered over a bridge of knives, and the dead had to declare his hidden name while stepping precisely in the footprints of earlier justified souls. One misstep and the bridge would vanish, but the most treacherous was the 11th hour, the one who sees the hidden face. Here, the dead encountered a lake of boiling ink where the god Kirti lurked beneath the surface. To cross, they had to chant the hour's name backward, confusing the demonic scribes who recorded failures. These names weren't just passwords, they were fragments of divine power, proof that the deceased had studied the Book of the Dead's deepest mysteries. And as dawn approached, those who'd survived the 12 hours didn't just witness the sunrise, they'd earned the right to greet it as allies of the gods themselves. Now let's uncover one of the Book of the Dead's most chilling secrets, the shadowy figures known as the enemies of Osiris. These weren't just ordinary adversaries. They were embodiments of chaos, forgotten sinners, or even corrupted souls who had failed their own judgments in the afterlife. To the ancient Egyptians, being associated with these entities was a fate worse than death itself, as it risked dragging the deceased into eternal punishment. The spells in the Book of the Dead reveal a desperate need for the dead to distance themselves from these foes. One powerful incantation, often found inscribed on tomb walls, declares, "I am not among them. I have not conspired with the rebels. My name is pure in the mouth of Osiris." This wasn't just a denial, it was a magical act of severing ties, ensuring the gods wouldn't mistake the deceased for one of these damned beings. Some of these enemies had names like the Eater of Shadows or the One Who Walks Backward, beings who lurked in the darkest corners of the Duat. Others were more abstract representations of moral failures like greed, deceit, or violence. The dead had to prove they hadn't committed these sins, reciting lists of virtues in what scholars call the negative confession, a way to cleanse their record before Osiris's tribunal. But perhaps the most fascinating detail, some spells didn't just defend against these enemies, they actively cursed them. A rare papyrus from Thebes includes a spell where the deceased commands, "May the enemies of Osiris be drowned in the lake of fire while I pass by untouched." This wasn't just survival, it was a declaration of moral superiority, a way to align oneself with divine order against the forces of chaos. Next, we'll explore how even the Book of the Dead's own scrolls held secrets. Some chapters were lost, others deliberately omitted. Because in the quest for immortality, knowledge wasn't just power, it was protection. Now let's turn our attention to a fascinating quirk of the Book of the Dead. No two copies were exactly alike. While we often think of it as a single, unchanging text, the reality is far more personal. Families and scribes would carefully select spells based on what they believed their loved ones would need most in the afterlife, creating a customized guide tailored to the individual. Some spells were so rare they've only been found in a handful of scrolls, while others, like the famous weighing of the heart ceremony, appear in nearly every version. Regional differences played a big role too. A scroll from Thebes might emphasize spells linked to local gods like Ammon, while one from Memphis could focus on Ptah or Sokar. Even the artwork varied, with some featuring lavish illustrations of the Duat's gates, while others kept it simple to save on costly papyrus. This customization wasn't just about preference, it was about power. Wealthier families could afford longer scrolls with more spells, giving their dead extra protection. One noble's Book of the Dead discovered in Akhmim even included a unique spell to guarantee fine clothing in the afterlife, a luxury most couldn't dream of. Meanwhile, poorer versions might skip entire sections, relying on cheaper materials or shorter texts. But here's the intriguing part. Some spells seem to have been deliberately left out of certain scrolls. Scholars speculate these might have been considered too dangerous for the uninitiated, or perhaps they were reserved for priests alone. A fragment from a temple archive hints at a secret chapter of Thoth, rumored to contain forbidden knowledge about reshaping reality itself, though no complete copy has ever been found. This patchwork of spells reminds us that the Book of the Dead wasn't just a religious text, it was a living document, shaped by the hopes, budgets, and secrets of those who commissioned it. And speaking of secrets, our next revelation takes us deeper into the Duat's dangers, where a cunning spell could mean the difference between salvation and an eternity trapped in the fisherman's net. Now let's uncover one of the Book of the Dead's most peculiar spells, a desperate plea to escape the clutches of a sinister figure known as the Fisherman. Imagine this: deep in the Duat, a demonic angler waits with his net, ready to snare wandering souls like fish in the Nile. Spell 15, often overlooked in modern discussions, was the ancient Egyptians' secret weapon against this terrifying fate. The spell paints a vivid picture. The deceased pleads, "I am no fish to be caught in your snare. My magic loosens your knots, your net tears like papyrus in the flood." These words weren't just poetic, they were a lifeline. Egyptians believed reciting them dissolved the fisherman's net, turning its ropes to dust. But who was this shadowy fisherman? Some scholars think he's linked to Nile myths, where chaotic beings lurked beneath the water's surface. The Nile's annual floods brought life, but also danger, much like the Duat's treacherous waters. Here's where it gets fascinating. The spell's metaphors mirror real fishing techniques. Just as Nile fishermen used weighted nets, the demon's trap was said to sink souls deeper into darkness. Breaking free required knowing the names of the net's knots, a clever twist on how fishermen repaired their gear. This wasn't just magic, it was a coded survival manual, blending everyday life with the supernatural. Could the fisherman be a distorted memory of the god Nun, the primordial watery chaos, or perhaps a warning against greed, with the net symbolizing materialism trapping the soul? The spell never clarifies, leaving us to wonder. What we do know is this: in a world where even the afterlife had predators, the Book of the Dead gave the dead hooks to cut themselves free. And as we reel in this mystery, our next secret plunges us into the silent language of symbols, where a single hieroglyph could mean the difference between protection and peril. Now let's step into the silent world of symbols, where every curve and line held the power to protect or condemn. The Book of the Dead wasn't just written in words, it was woven with hieroglyphs that pulsed with magic. Take the Eye of Horus, or Wedjat, for example. This iconic symbol wasn't just art, it was a shield. Egyptians believed it carried the healing power of the god Horus, who lost his eye in a battle with Set and had it restored by Thoth. When painted on a mummy's wrappings or carved into amulets, the Wedjat became a living charm, guarding against decay and evil spirits. It even had mathematical significance. Its fractions were used to measure offerings, blending practicality with divinity. Then there's the Shen ring, a loop of rope tied at one end, often clutched by deities like Horus or Isis. This simple shape held cosmic weight. The Shen symbolized eternity, its unbroken circle representing the sun's endless journey, and by extension, the soul's unending life. Pharaohs wore it as a bracelet, and it encircled the names of kings, declaring their rule timeless. But its magic wasn't just for royalty. In spells, the Shen ring trapped chaotic forces, its knot sealing away demons like a cork in a bottle. But symbols could cut both ways. The serpent hieroglyph, for instance, might represent Apophis, the chaos dragon, in one context, yet in another, it could signify transformation as snakes shed their skin. That's why precision mattered. A misplaced stroke in a tomb inscription might accidentally invoke a curse instead of a blessing. The Book of the Dead scribes trained for years to master this visual language, knowing that a well-drawn ankh, the looped cross symbolizing life, could literally breathe vitality into the deceased. And here's the twist: some symbols were deliberately hidden. The Jed pillar, representing Osiris's spine and stability, was often painted on mummies' necks but facing inward, unseen by the living. Its power worked in secret, a silent backbone for the soul's journey. This was the genius of Egyptian symbolism. Every image was a spell, every glyph a guardian. As we unlock these ancient codes, our next secret pulls back the curtain on the afterlife's darkest fate. What happened to those who failed the god's judgment? Now let's turn our gaze to the scales of justice and what happened when they tipped toward doom. While the righteous dead basked in the field of reeds, those who failed the weighing of the heart ceremony faced a fate so terrifying, even the ancient Egyptians whispered about it in hushed tones. At the foot of Osiris's throne lurked Ammit, the devourer, part lion, part hippo, part crocodile, a creature designed for one gruesome purpose. When a heart proved heavier than Maat's feather, signaling a life weighed down by deceit or violence, Amit didn't just destroy it. She consumed the very essence of the person. Imagine your heart, not just the organ, but your memories, your identity, your chance at eternity being swallowed whole. This was the second death, a complete erasure from existence. No afterlife, no rebirth, just endless nothingness. Some texts even suggest the condemned soul faced torment in the Duat's darkest pits, chased by demons or forced to crawl upside down through fire. But here's what's chilling. The Egyptians believed this judgment was flawless. Thoth, the god of wisdom, recorded the verdict. Anubis, the meticulous weigher, never misread the scales. There was no appeal, no second chance. That's why the Book of the Dead spent so many spells coaching the dead on what to say and what not to say before the gods. One wrong confession, one overlooked sin, and Amit's jaws waited. Yet even in this grim fate, there's a fascinating twist. The unjustified weren't just evil people. They were often those who failed to prepare, souls who didn't bring the right spells, who forgot the gods' names, or whose families skimped on tomb offerings. In a way, the Book of the Dead was the ultimate survival guide, and Amit, she was the consequence of being unprepared. As we step away from the shadow of the devourer, our next secret reveals a brighter path where two goddesses wept, chanted, and shielded the dead with their very hands. Now let's shift our focus to the two goddesses who stood as pillars of protection in the afterlife, Isis and Nephthys. These divine sisters weren't just mourners, they were guardians, their voices weaving spells of safety around the dead. When Osiris was murdered and dismembered by Set, it was Isis and Nephthys who gathered his scattered pieces, using their magic to restore him to wholeness. Their grief wasn't passive, it was powerful. Their lamentations became sacred chants, their tears a kind of magic that could heal and shield. This act didn't just save Osiris, it set the blueprint for every Egyptian burial that followed. Priests would later take on the roles of Isis and Nephthys during funeral rites, reciting their spells and performing their rituals to protect the deceased. The sisters' words were so potent that they were woven into the Book of the Dead, ensuring the dead had their own divine guardians. One spell even calls them the two kites, birds of prey whose sharp cries warded off evil spirits. But their role went beyond just protection. Isis and Nephthys were also guides, helping souls navigate the Duat's dangers. They stood at the prow of the solar bark with Ra, their presence a reassurance against the chaos of Apophis. And in the darkest hours of the underworld, their voices could be heard whispering the names of the dead to the gods, ensuring they weren't forgotten. What's striking is how their story mirrors human grief and hope. The Egyptians didn't just see them as distant deities, they saw them as sisters who understood loss, who turned sorrow into strength. When a family mourned their loved one, they weren't alone. Isis and Nephthys mourned with them, and in that shared grief, they offered something priceless, the promise that no one had to face the afterlife unprotected. As we move forward, keep their presence in mind because our next secret reveals how even the smallest amulets could carry the weight of their magic. Now let's uncover another layer of protection woven into the Egyptian afterlife, the four sons of Horus. These weren't just minor deities, they were the guardians of the canopic jars, the sacred vessels that held the preserved organs of the deceased. Each son had a distinct role and a unique connection to both the body and the cosmos. First, there was Imseti, the human-headed protector of the liver. His presence ensured this vital organ remained intact, symbolizing emotional balance and vitality. Then came Hapi, the baboon-headed guardian of the lungs, whose name even sounds like the breath of life itself. Duamutef, with the head of a jackal, watched over the stomach, a reminder that even in death, nourishment and transformation mattered. And finally, Kebesenuf, the falcon-headed son, shielded the intestines, linking purification to the swiftness of a bird in flight. But their magic didn't stop at organ preservation. These four were also tied to the cardinal directions Imseti to the south, Hapi to the north, Duamutef to the east, and Kebesenuf to the west. This wasn't random. It mirrored the Egyptians' belief that the body, like the universe, needed harmony in all directions to achieve eternal stability. Spells in the Book of the Dead often invoked them as a united force, calling on their combined power to deflect chaos and keep the deceased's body and soul whole. What's fascinating is how these deities blurred the line between the physical and the spiritual. The organs they guarded weren't just preserved for the sake of tradition, they were seen as essential for the soul's rebirth. Without them, the dead might face the dreaded second death, annihilation. So the next time you see a canopic jaw in a museum, remember, it's not just an ancient artifact. It's a snapshot of divine teamwork, a pact between mortals and gods to cheat oblivion itself. And speaking of divine teamwork, our next secret reveals how even the simplest objects like a single amulet could hold the power to reunite the soul with its body. Now let's turn our attention to one of the most fundamental human needs, breath, and how the ancient Egyptians ensured it followed them into the afterlife. Secret 20 reveals the spell to breathe air beyond death, a vital ritual tied directly to the resurrection of Osiris himself. Imagine standing at the threshold of eternity, your body preserved, your heart judged, but without the ability to draw breath. For the Egyptians, this wasn't just a physical necessity, it was a spiritual lifeline. The Book of the Dead contains spells specifically designed to grant the deceased the breath of life, often invoking Osiris as the ultimate symbol of rebirth. One powerful incantation declares, "You shall live, you shall breathe, your bar shall not be restrained." This wasn't mere poetry, it was a divine command, ensuring the soul could move freely and sustain itself in the Duat. But how did they make this promise tangible? Through symbolism as clever as it was profound. Priests would place open-mouthed statues near the mummy or even carve them into tomb walls, their gaping mouths symbolizing an eternal intake of air. Mirrors, too, played a surprising role, not for vanity but as portals. Their reflective surfaces were thought to capture and redirect life-giving forces, much like sunlight bouncing off the Nile. Some spells even instructed the dead to hold a mirror to their faces, a ritual gesture mimicking the moment of awakening. And here's the deeper layer. This breath wasn't just oxygen. It represented the unseen energy that animated all things, the same force that filled Osiris' lungs when Isis resurrected him. By tying these spells to his myth, the dead weren't just begging for air. They were claiming their place in a cycle of renewal that even death couldn't break. So the next time you take a deep breath, think of those ancient spells whispering across millennia. They remind us that for the Egyptians, life didn't end at the last exhale, it simply transformed. And speaking of transformation, our next secret uncovers how the blessed dead navigated the afterlife's most perilous waterways without ever lifting an oar. Now let's step into a realm where death was not an end but a doorway to paradise. Secret 21 unveils the forgotten land of the Field of Reeds, the Egyptian vision of eternal bliss. Picture endless golden fields of grain swaying under a perfect sky, crystal-clear canals brimming with life-giving water, and orchards heavy with fruit that never rots. This was no ordinary afterlife, it was a mirror of Egypt itself, but perfected, free from drought or hardship. For the ancient Egyptians, the Field of Reeds wasn't just a reward, it was a reflection of their deepest values. Agriculture was the heartbeat of their civilization, and so their paradise echoed the fertile Nile Valley, but without toil. Spells in the Book of the Dead promised the deceased would reap barley 5 cubits high, a poetic guarantee that abundance would never fade. Unlike the Greek Elysium or the Mesopotamian land of no return, the Field of Reeds wasn't reserved for heroes or gods. Any soul who passed the weighing of the heart could walk its sunlit paths, provided they knew the right spells to navigate there. But here's what made it truly unique. This paradise wasn't just about leisure. The dead were expected to work the fields, not with sweat but with magic. They'd recite incantations to summon shabti dolls, miniature servants who'd labor in their place. Even in perfection, the Egyptians honored the cycles of sowing and reaping, tying eternity to the rhythms that sustained their world. And that symbolism runs deeper. The field of reeds wasn't just a destination, it was proof that death, like the Nile's flood, was a renewal. Just as barren land sprang green after the waters retreated, the soul emerged into this radiant afterlife. No wonder tombs were stocked with model granaries and tiny plows. These weren't just offerings, but blueprints for a divine future. So while other cultures feared shadowy underworlds, the Egyptians dared to imagine an eternity drenched in sunlight and abundance. And as we'll see next, reaching this paradise required more than a pure heart. It demanded secret knowledge to outwit the guardians of the Duat's winding paths. Now let's uncover the hidden ceremonies that guided souls through the afterlife's treacherous roads. Secret 22 reveals the sacred rituals of the opening of the way, a powerful set of spells designed to remove obstacles blocking the deceased's journey. Imagine priests in linen robes chanting over a mummy, their voices weaving magic to unlock gates, dissolve barriers, and even calm the wrath of underworld guardians. This wasn't just ceremony, it was a divine roadwork crew clearing the path to eternity. At the heart of this ritual stood Anubis, the jackal-headed god who didn't just weigh hearts but also served as the ultimate guide. Spells invoked him to lift the face of the dead, a poetic way of saying he'd help the soul recognize and navigate the Duat's labyrinthine passages. Think of Anubis as both a spiritual GPS and a bouncer. He knew every turn and could silence hostile demons with a growl. Then there was the Hemhum crown, a triple-tiered headpiece often shown on protective deities. Its name means roaring, and it wasn't just for show. When drawn or described in spells, this crown acted like a force field, its layered design symbolizing the power to repel chaos in all directions. Picture it as a divine crash helmet for the soul, shielding against everything from venomous serpents to deceptive spirits luring the dead off course. But the true genius of these rituals, they turn the priests into cosmic engineers. By reciting spells like "Open the way for him whose face is hidden," they didn't just ask for help, they commanded the universe to rearrange itself. Some incantations even included physical acts like touching a golden adze to the mummy's mouth, symbolically breaking invisible chains. And here's the twist, these rites didn't end at the tomb. Families repeated them for years at memorial chapels, ensuring their loved ones kept moving forward in the afterlife. Because in Egyptian belief, the journey didn't stop at the grave, it required constant renewal, just like the Nile's life-giving floods. Up next, we'll examine how a simple knot could outmatch the fiercest demons as we unravel the protective power of the Tet amulet. Now let's turn our attention to a small but mighty guardian of the afterlife, the Tet amulet, also known as the Knot of Isis. This powerful symbol wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a lifeline for the dead, woven with magic to stabilize, protect, and reunite. Picture it as a divine seatbelt, securing the soul against the twists and turns of the underworld. The Tet amulet took the form of a looped knot, resembling the girdle Isis wore in ancient art. But this wasn't just about fashion, it symbolized the unshakable stability of the goddess herself. Spells called upon its power to fasten the flesh to the bones, ensuring the mummy stayed intact so the soul could return. Imagine it as a spiritual glue, holding the body together against decay or demonic forces trying to tear it apart. Some of the most striking spells show the Tet in action against underworld threats. In one, the dead declare, "The knot of Isis saves me from the slaughterers," or referring to demons who dismembered the unworthy. Another describes how the amulet repels the serpent with 7 heads, a clear nod to the chaos serpent Apophis. It didn't just deflect physical danger, it shielded the soul's very identity, preventing the horror of being forgotten in the afterlife. Priests often placed the Tet amulet at the mummy's throat, a spot thought to bridge the physical and spiritual. This positioning wasn't random, it mirrored how Isis used her magic to restore Osiris' voice, allowing him to reclaim his throne. For the deceased, wearing the Tet meant gaining that same royal authority to speak before the gods and demand passage through the Duat. What's fascinating is how this symbol not connected to bigger ideas. Its loop echoed the cyclical nature of life and death, while its tight weave mirrored the unbreakable bond between body and soul. Even the materials mattered. Many Tet amulets were made of red jasper or carnelian, stones believed to carry the blood of Isis, infusing them with her healing power. But perhaps its greatest secret, the Tet didn't just protect, it transformed. Spells promised that wearing it would let the dead rise as a living soul, blending Osiris' resurrection with the daily rebirth of the sun. Next, we'll see how another symbol, the lotus, turned this promise into reality, using the power of light itself to awaken the soul. Now let's unfold the secrets of the lotus, a flower that held the key to rebirth in the Egyptian afterlife. Unlike any ordinary bloom, the lotus had a magical rhythm. It closed its petals at sunset and reopened them at dawn, mirroring the sun's journey. To the ancient Egyptians, this wasn't just a natural wonder. It was a living symbol of resurrection, a promise that death was merely a temporary closing before a glorious reopening. Spells in the Book of the Dead harnessed the lotus's power to awaken the soul. One powerful incantation describes the deceased rising, like the lotus that emerges pure from the waters, linking their rebirth to the flower's daily cycle. Imagine the soul as a lotus bud, submerged in the darkness of the Duat, only to burst forth renewed at dawn, just as Ra's light returned to the sky. This wasn't poetic metaphor, it was divine mechanics. The lotus spell acted as a cosmic alarm clock, ensuring the soul didn't oversleep its resurrection. The lotus also had a solar connection. Its golden center mirrored the sun disk, and spells often paired it with Ra's name. In one ritual, the dead would wear a lotus amulet while reciting, "I am the lotus that ascends with Ra," merging their rebirth with the sun god's eternal cycle. Even the flower's stem played a role. Its spiral shape echoed the winding path of the underworld, suggesting the soul could climb back to life just as the lotus rises through murky waters to meet the light. But the lotus held a darker secret too. Its roots tangled in the underworld's depths, connecting it to Nun, the primordial waters of chaos. This duality made it unique. It drew power from both order and chaos, just as the justified dead had to navigate Maat's balance while surviving the Duat's terrors. Spells invoked this balance, with the lotus serving as a bridge between the drowned Osiris and the living Horus, between midnight and dawn. Perhaps most strikingly, the lotus wasn't just a symbol, it was a tool. Priests would place real or crafted lotus flowers near mummies, their petals painted with spells that opened at the right moment in the afterlife journey. Some burial texts even describe the soul transforming into a lotus, its petals unfolding to reveal a radiant, reborn form. Next, we'll explore how this floral magic tied into the grander vision of paradise, the field of reeds, where the justified dead walked among eternal harvests. Now let's step into a fascinating duality, the Egyptian belief that the soul could inhabit two realms at once. The afterlife wasn't just a single destination. The justified dead yearned to walk the golden paths of the sky with Ra by day, then descend into the shadowy depths of the underworld with Osiris by night. This was the secret of the two lands, a celestial balancing act that granted the soul the best of both worlds. Spells in the Book of the Dead made this dual existence possible. One powerful incantation declares, "I fly as a falcon to the horizon, I descend as a star into the Duat," capturing the soul's ability to traverse both realms. The sky offered freedom, riding in Ra's solar bark, feasting on light and wind, while the underworld provided stability, with Osiris ensuring the soul's roots remained nourished in the fertile dark. The key to this duality lay in transformation. Some spells allowed the dead to take the form of a heron at dawn, joining Ra's crew, then morph into a serpent at dusk to slither through the underworld's gates. Others invoked Thoth as a mediator, his lunar magic bridging the divide between solar and chthonic realms. A particularly vivid spell describes the soul's shadow splitting, one half glowing like daylight, the other merging with Osiris's murky throne, yet remaining whole. This twofold existence wasn't just spiritual luxury. It mirrored Egypt's own geography, the fertile black land of the Nile and the harsh red land of the desert, teaching that wholeness required embracing opposites. The dead who mastered this secret became like the horizon itself, where sky touches earth, forever balanced between rising and setting, between Ra's fire and Osiris's cool embrace. Next, we'll confront a far darker aspect of the afterlife, the demon known as the Eater of the Dead, a lurking terror that threatened to consume even the most carefully prepared souls. But now, let's turn our attention to one of the most chilling threats lurking in the shadows of the Duat, the Eater of the Dead. This lesser-known demon wasn't just a predator of flesh or bone. It feasted on something far more precious, the shadows of the deceased. In Egyptian belief, a shadow wasn't just a dark silhouette. It held a piece of the soul's life force. To lose it meant fading into oblivion, a fate worse than physical destruction. The Book of the Dead reveals spells specifically designed to confront this horror. One chilling incantation warns, "Turn away your jaws, Eater of Shadows, for I am armed with the name of Ra." Here, the deceased wields the sun god's name like a weapon, exploiting the demon's vulnerability to divine light. Other spells take a different approach, bribing the creature with offerings of bread, beer, or even golden amulets, appealing to its hunger without surrendering the soul's essence. What makes this entity so terrifying is its stealth. Unlike Ammit, who awaited souls openly at the scales of judgment, the Eater of the Dead prowled the Duat's forgotten corridors, striking when the soul was weakest, often during the perilous midnight hours of Ra's journey. A particularly clever spell disguises the deceased as a shadowless one, tricking the demon into bypassing them entirely. Yet there's a deeper symbolism here. The Eater embodies the ancient fear of being forgotten. Its appetite mirrors how time erases names and memories. That's why some spells don't just repel it, they rewrite its nature, transforming it from devourer to guardian with phrases like, "You shall taste only the wicked, for my shadow is inscribed in the temple of Thoth." This struggle against the Eater reveals a profound truth. The Egyptians saw the afterlife as an active battleground, where even victorious souls had to remain vigilant. Next, we'll uncover how the dead could reclaim what was lost through the secret spell to reunite with their own shadows. Now, let's uncover one of the most fascinating and lesser-known spells from the Book of the Dead, the secret ritual to reunite with one's shadow. For the ancient Egyptians, a shadow wasn't just a fleeting dark shape. It was a vital part of the soul's essence, a fragment of life force that could mean the difference between eternal existence and utter oblivion. Imagine standing in the Duat, feeling your shadow slipping away, stolen by unseen forces. Without it, your very identity could dissolve into nothingness. That's where this powerful spell comes in, a lifeline to reclaim what was lost. One incantation declares, "O my shadow, return to me, for I am the justified one, the pure of heart." Here, the deceased doesn't just beg for their shadow's return. They command it, asserting their righteousness as proof they deserve wholeness. But how exactly did this magic work? Some spells call upon Thoth, the god of wisdom, to stitch the shadow back to the soul with celestial thread. Others invoke the sun god Ra, whose light could chase away the darkness that separated a person from their shadow. There's even a hauntingly beautiful ritual where the deceased would stand before a mirror, whispering, "As my reflection is whole, so too shall my shadow be restored," blending the physical and spiritual realms. What's truly remarkable is how this spell reveals the Egyptians' understanding of the soul's complexity. They didn't see the shadow as a mere accessory. It was a living, breathing part of existence. Losing it meant decay, not just of the body, but of memory, identity, and purpose. That's why these incantations often include promises like, "My shadow shall never wander, for it is bound to my name in the halls of eternity." This wasn't just about survival, it was about integrity. To be whole in the afterlife, every piece of the self had to be accounted for, protected, and cherished. And with that, we're ready to step into another layer of the Book of the Dead's mysteries, where the gods themselves hold the keys to the soul's ultimate fate. Now, let's turn our attention to a powerful assembly of deities known as the Pesajit, or the Ennead, the 9 creator gods who shaped the cosmos itself. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, calling upon these divine beings wasn't just about reverence, it was a strategic move to secure favor in the afterlife's most critical moment, the weighing of the heart. Picture this, standing before Osiris and the Council of Gods, your fate hanging in the balance. To prove your worthiness, you'd recite a spell invoking the Ennead, naming each member with precision: Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Jeb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. By aligning yourself with these primordial forces, you weren't just asking for mercy, you were asserting your place in the divine order, as if to say, "I am part of the same fabric that wove the universe." But why these 9? The Ennead represented the complete cycle of creation, from Atum's first emergence from chaos to the rise of Osiris as Lord of the Dead. Spells name-dropping them carried immense weight, almost like presenting a royal seal in a courtroom. One incantation declares, "May the Ennead hear my voice, for I am pure like the tears of Tefnut, steadfast like the pillars of Shu." Here, the deceased doesn't just list gods, they embody their virtues, borrowing their legitimacy. And there's a clever twist. Some spells specifically mention how the Ennead nodded in agreement at the dawn of time, establishing Mat, the principle of truth and justice. By invoking that ancient moment, the dead reminded the gods of their own commitment to fairness, making it harder to deny them passage. It's like saying, "You set these rules, now honor them." This secret reveals how deeply the Egyptians understood the politics of the divine. To survive judgment, you didn't just need a clean heart, you needed the right references. And with the Ennead in your corner, even the scales of justice tipped in your favor. Next, we'll venture into the darkest hour of Ra's journey, where the midnight sun tests the dead's resolve like never before. Now we step into the shadow of Ra's most perilous hour, the midnight sun, a moment when the boundaries between life and death grow dangerously thin. As the sun god navigates the deepest, darkest stretch of the Duat, even his light flickers and the dead face their ultimate test. This is no ordinary trial. Here, chaos reigns and Apophis, the serpent of destruction, coils closest to swallowing Ra whole. For the soul journeying through the afterlife, surviving this hour means outwitting darkness itself. The Book of the Dead reveals spells specifically crafted for this crisis. One powerful incantation calls upon Thoth, the god of wisdom, to act as a divine negotiator. The spell declares, "O Thoth, whose words pacify the storm, stand between me and the devourer. Let your tongue weave protection as you did for Osiris in his darkest hour." This isn't just a plea, it's a strategic reminder of Thoth's past victories, ensuring he intervenes with full force. But why is midnight so treacherous? During this hour, Ra's solar bark passes through the Lake of Fire, a realm where flames don't burn, they judge. The unjust are consumed while the pure are refined. Spells from the Book of the Dead teach the deceased how to mimic Ra's resilience with phrases like, "I am the flame that cannot be quenched, the light that outshadows the void." By echoing Ra's own declarations, the dead align themselves with his unyielding power. And there's a chilling twist. Some texts warn that the midnight sun reveals the dead's deepest fears. To combat this, spells instruct the soul to name the darkness aloud, identifying every demon and doubt, to strip them of their power. It's a psychological masterstroke, turning terror into a mere list of conquerable foes. This secret uncovers a profound truth. The Egyptians believed even the sun god needed help in his darkest moment. For the dead, surviving the midnight sun wasn't about brute strength. It was about wisdom, allies, and the right words at the right time. And with Thoth's guidance, dawn always followed. Next, we'll meet an unlikely guardian of rebirth, the hippo goddess Taweret, whose fierce love defied the chaos of the underworld. Now, let's turn our attention to an unexpected guardian of the afterlife, Taweret, the hippo goddess. While her appearance might seem intimidating, with the body of a hippopotamus, the paws of a lion, and the back of a crocodile, Taweret was anything but a threat to the dead. In fact, she was one of the most fiercely protective deities in Egyptian mythology, especially during the delicate moments of rebirth. Taweret's role was unique. Unlike many gods who ruled over specific realms or rituals, she specialized in shielding the vulnerable, particularly mothers, newborns, and the recently deceased, from the chaos that lurked in the underworld. Her very form was a weapon against evil. The hippo symbolized raw power, the lion represented courage, and the crocodile embodied stealth, making her a triple threat against any force that dared disrupt the journey to rebirth. To harness her protection, Egyptians crafted amulets in her likeness, often made of faience or carnelian, and placed them in tombs or on mummies. These charms weren't just decorative, they were believed to pulse with her energy, warding off demons like Ammit or the Eater of the Dead. One spell from the Book of the Dead even instructs the deceased to wear a Taweret amulet while reciting, "Great of roar, swift of strike, let your shadow cover me as I pass through the waters of rebirth." The waters here refer to the celestial Nile, a symbolic threshold between death and renewal. But Taweret's magic wasn't just about brute force. She also embodied the nurturing side of chaos, the kind that fuels creation rather than destruction. In one obscure ritual, priests would place clay figurines of Taweret near the mummy's feet, a gesture meant to mimic her role in the myth of Horus' birth, where she stood guard as Isis brought her son into the world. By invoking this story, the dead could tap into her power to safely navigate their own rebirth into the afterlife. What's fascinating is how Taweret's influence blurred the lines between life and death. While most underworld deities focused solely on the deceased, she was equally revered by the living. Pregnant women wore her amulets to ensure safe deliveries, and households kept statues of her to ward off misfortune. This duality made her a bridge between worlds, a reminder that the same forces protecting the living could guide the dead. So why does Taweret's role matter? Because she reveals a profound truth about Egyptian beliefs. Rebirth wasn't just a spiritual concept, it was a physical, emotional, and cosmic battle. And with Taweret's might on their side, the dead stood a fighting chance against the chaos that sought to swallow them whole. Next, we'll uncover how the ancient Egyptians ensured they wouldn't spend eternity laboring like peasants thanks to a clever spell and tiny magical helpers. Now, let's step into a fascinating aspect of the afterlife that even the ancient Egyptians wanted to avoid: eternal hard labor. Imagine spending forever toiling in the fields or hauling bricks under the scorching sun. Not exactly the paradise you'd hope for, right? Well, the Egyptians agreed, and they came up with a brilliant solution: magical servants called Shabti dolls. These small figurines, often carved from wood, stone, or faience, were buried with the deceased to act as their stand-ins in the afterlife. The idea was simple but genius. If the gods called upon the dead to perform manual labor, the Shabti would answer instead. Each doll was inscribed with a spell, usually a variation of the famous Shabti formula, which commanded the figurine to spring to life and say, "I will do it." Here I am, whenever work was demanded. But Shabtis weren't just generic helpers. Wealthy Egyptians sometimes had an entire workforce buried with them, one Shabti for every day of the year, plus overseer figures to manage them. These overseer Shabtis often held whips, symbolizing their authority to command the others. It was like having an entire agricultural team at your eternal disposal. The spells themselves were precise. One from the Book of the Dead reads, "O Shabti, if I am called upon to do any work in the afterlife, To irrigate the fields, to ferry sand, to cultivate the crops, you shall say, I will do it. I am here. This wasn't just wishful thinking. Egyptians believed these words, combined with the doll's physical form, created a real, functioning servant in the Duat. What's even more intriguing is how this reflects Egyptian society. The fear of posthumous labor mirrored the lives of the lower classes who toiled endlessly under the pharaoh's rule. The afterlife, in their view, shouldn't replicate those hardships, so Shabtis became the ultimate insurance policy, a way to ensure even the humblest souls could enjoy a peaceful eternity. Next, we'll unravel the mystery of the Ba and Ka, the two soul aspects that held the key to eternal life. Now, let's uncover one of the most profound mysteries of the Egyptian afterlife, the secret of the Ba and the Ka. These weren't just abstract ideas, but the very essence of what made a person whole in eternity. Think of the Ba as your personality, your unique spirit that could move freely, while the Ka was your life force, the energy that kept you alive in this world and the next. Without them, eternal life was impossible. The Ba was often depicted as a bird with a human head, symbolizing its ability to travel between realms. It could leave the tomb during the day, visiting the living world or soaring with the gods, but it always returned to the mummy at night. The Ka, on the other hand, was more like a divine spark, a kind of spiritual double that needed nourishment even after death. This is why Egyptians left food and drink in tombs. They believed the Ka consumed their essence to sustain itself. But here's where the Book of the Dead worked its magic. Spells were designed to reunite the Ba and Ka with the mummy, ensuring the deceased could live forever. One powerful incantation called upon Osiris himself, saying, "May my Ba come to me from wherever it is, may my Ka come to me from wherever it is, so that I may be whole again in the afterlife." Without this reunion, the soul would wander, lost and incomplete. The rituals didn't stop there. Priests performed ceremonies to awaken the Ka, using sacred oils and prayers to activate its power. Meanwhile, the Ba's mobility was protected by spells that warded off demons who might trap or harm it. Together, these practices ensured the dead could enjoy the afterlife as fully as they had lived, free to move, to feast, and to exist forever in the presence of the gods. Next, we'll step inside the hidden chambers of the House of Osiris, where the justified souls faced their final judgment. Now, let's step beyond the weighing of the heart and into the very heart of the afterlife itself, the hidden chambers of the House of Osiris. Picture a grand, otherworldly mansion, not of stone and wood, but of magic and divine light, where only the most worthy souls were granted entry. This was no ordinary dwelling. It was the eternal home of Osiris, lord of the underworld, and the final destination for those who passed the judgment of the gods. The journey began at its towering gates, each guarded by deities and inscribed with spells to repel the unworthy. To enter, the dead had to recite secret names and affirm their purity, proving they hadn't lied or stolen in life. Beyond the gates lay a series of halls, each more magnificent than the last. Some shimmered with celestial gold, while others glowed with the eerie light of the Duat, the underworld's sunless sky. At the center of this divine mansion stood the Hall of Truth, where the Council of 30, a group of powerful gods and judges, awaited. Here, the dead faced one final trial. Osiris presided, flanked by Isis and Nephthys, while Thoth recorded the proceedings. The council scrutinized every aspect of the soul's life, from deeds to intentions, ensuring no darkness lingered. Only those who passed this ultimate test could claim their place among the blessed, feasting alongside Osiris in eternal bliss. But the House of Osiris wasn't just a reward, it was a fortress against chaos. Its walls were lined with spells to repel demons, and its corridors echoed with hymns to keep Apophis, the serpent of destruction, at bay. For the Egyptians, this wasn't just mythology. It was the promise of a perfected existence where justice and order reigned forever. Next, we'll confront one of the Duat's most terrifying threats, the entity known only as the Swallower, and the desperate spells used to escape its grasp. But even within the sacred walls of the House of Osiris, danger lurked in the shadows. Among the most feared entities of the Duat was the Swallower, a monstrous being that devoured souls whole, erasing them from existence. Unlike Ammit, who consumed only the guilty, the Swallower showed no mercy. It hunted indiscriminately, a force of pure annihilation. The Book of the Dead held a desperate secret to outwit this horror. Spells like the one found in Chapter 97 didn't rely on brute force but on cunning wordplay. The deceased would declare, "I am the unswallowable one, the seed of the god Autumn." By invoking Autumn, the creator who emerged from primordial chaos, the soul claimed divine ancestry, making it too powerful to consume. Other spells called on Thoth's wisdom, weaving riddles that confused the Swallower long enough for escape. Some incantations took a different approach, bargaining with the beast. Offerings of light or sacred names were fed to it as distractions, like tossing meat to a wild animal. One spell even tricked the Swallower into believing it had already devoured the soul, whispering, "You are full, your belly heavy with the stars, but the most potent defense." Allies, spells summoned protective deities like Selkit, the scorpion goddess, whose venom could paralyze the Swallower, or Seth, whose chaos magic turned the creature's hunger against itself. These strategies reveal the Egyptians' deep understanding of psychology, fighting terror not with strength but with wit, deception, and divine favor. Now let's ascend from the Duat's horrors to a symbol of hope, the celestial cow whose back cradled the sun itself. Rising from the darkness of the Duat, we find a symbol of hope and rebirth, the celestial cow Mehit Werti, whose very body arched across the heavens. Unlike the terrors lurking below, this divine bovine cradled the sun god Ra each dawn, lifting him from the underworld into the sky. Her name meant Great Flood, linking her to the life-giving waters of the Nile and the cosmic ocean from which creation emerged. The Book of the Dead reveals spells where the deceased implored Mehit Werti to carry them just as she carried Ra. One incantation declares, "I rise with you upon the back of the celestial cow, my bones made of stars, my breath the wind of dawn." By aligning themselves with Ra's solar journey, souls sought to escape the cycle of decay, ascending to a sky-bound afterlife. But this rebirth wasn't passive, it required cunning. Spells instructed the dead to mimic Ra's transformations, shifting into a golden scarab or a heron to ride the cow's back. Others invoked her as a nurturing mother, with one passage pleading, "O Mehit Werti, let your milk be the light that guides me to the horizon." This wasn't just poetry, it was sacred mimicry, using the cow's mythic role to secure a place among the imperishable stars. The celestial cow's power even extended to protection. Just as she shielded Ra from the serpent Apophis, spells called upon her horns to pierce chaotic forces threatening the deceased. A vivid vignette in some scrolls shows her standing atop a papyrus thicket, a nod to her role as a foundation of order, lifting both gods and mortals beyond chaos. Now, as we leave the heavens behind, we descend into the Duat's depths once more, where a far darker secret awaits, the bloodless ones, spirits who thirsted for the essence of the dead. Deep in the shadows of the Duat, far from the celestial cow's light, lurked a horror the Egyptians feared above all: the bloodless ones. These twisted spirits, withered by eternal hunger, stalked the afterlife like jackals, draining the very essence of the dead. Unlike demons who tested souls, the bloodless ones sought only to consume, leaving their victims hollowed husks, doomed to wander without memory or purpose. The Book of the Dead exposes their weakness in spell 37, which warns, "Their tongues are fire, but their bellies are dust." To starve these predators, priests buried the dead with offerings of salt, a symbol of purity that repelled corruption. Iron amulets shaped like the Eye of Horus were placed on mummies, as the metal's celestial origin, believed to be the bones of Ra, burned the bloodless ones like sunlight. But the most chilling defense, deception. Spells taught the dead to mimic the gods' voices, shouting, "I am Thoth, whose words are knives," or "I am Isis, who feeds the hungry with mercy." By tricking the bloodless ones into believing they faced a deity, the soul could slip past their clutches. One scroll even depicts a macabre bargain offering the demons a substitute. Take the shadow of my enemy, let it fill your jaws instead. This reveals a grim truth. Survival in the afterlife sometimes meant sacrificing others, yet for all their terror, the bloodless ones had a fatal flaw. Spells like the chant that turns hunger backward exploited their endless craving, trapping them in cycles of self-consumption until they dissolved into the Duat sands. Now, as we step away from these ravenous spirits, another pillar of protection rises before us: the enduring power of the Jed, the backbone of Osiris himself. As we leave behind the chilling grasp of the bloodless ones, let us turn our attention to a symbol of unshakable strength, the Jed pillar. This ancient emblem, often carved into tomb walls or fashioned into amulets, was far more than just an artistic motif. It represented the very spine of Osiris, the god of resurrection, and stood as a promise of stability in the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that just as the spine holds the body upright, the Jed held the cosmos in balance. During key rituals, priests would perform the raising of the Jed ceremony, a powerful act symbolizing Osiris' triumph over death. By lifting the pillar, they mirrored the moment Isis and Anubis restored Osiris' body, ensuring his rebirth. This ritual wasn't just symbolic. It was a direct plea for durability, both for the deceased and the universe itself. Spells from the Book of the Dead invoke the Jed's power with phrases like, "Stand firm as the Jed of Osiris, unshaken by chaos." Mummies were often adorned with small Jed amulets placed near the spine to fortify the soul's journey. Some texts even describe the pillar as a ladder, allowing the dead to ascend to the stars, forever anchored in eternity. And here's a fascinating detail. The Jed's 4 horizontal bars might represent the 4 pillars of the sky or the cardinal directions, tying the deceased to the eternal order of man. To the Egyptians, this wasn't just magic. It was architecture for immortality. Now, as the Jed's shadow stretches across our path, another guardian awaits, one who knows every name and face at the gates of the Duat. But beyond the steadfast Jed pillar, the journey through the underworld demanded one more crucial key: the names of those who stood guard at its gates. Picture this: as the soul ventured deeper into the Duat, it faced towering portals, each barred by a fearsome doorkeeper. These weren't mere sentries, they were living tests, and knowing their secret names meant the difference between passage and peril. Take the guardian known as Flaming Face, whose very glance could scorch an unprepared soul. Or Eater of Shadows, a demon who fed on the essence of those who faltered in reciting the proper spells. The Book of the Dead reveals over 20 such gatekeepers, each with a name as cryptic as their appearance: he who binds with fear, voice like thunder, and the one who turns back the unworthy. Here's how the ancients outwitted them. Spells like, "I know you, keeper of the third hour, your name is Sharp Tooth, but I am the scent of lotus on Ra's brow." By flattering these entities or invoking divine connections, the dead could disarm their hostility. Some texts even instructed the deceased to carry carved amulets inscribed with a doorkeeper's name, a kind of supernatural password. And the cleverest trick, the spells often addressed the guardians as equals, not foes. "We are both servants of Osiris," one incantation whispers, "so let my heart's truth be your guide." This wasn't brute force, it was psychological warfare, using words as weapons to turn jailers into allies. Now, as the last gate creaks open, a grander secret awaits, one that doesn't just navigate the afterlife but conquers it entirely. But beyond the gates of the Duat lay the ultimate prize: not just survival, but divinity itself. The lost spell to become the Lord of Eternity wasn't merely about escaping death, it was a blueprint for transcending it entirely. Imagine standing before the gods not as a supplicant, but as an equal. This was the promise hidden in the Book of the Dead's most coveted incantations. The title Lord of Eternity wasn't poetic exaggeration. To the Egyptians, it meant merging with the cosmic cycle of Osiris, the resurrected god, or riding the solar bark of Ra across the sky forever. Spells like "I am Osiris," "My flesh is gold, my bones are silver" didn't just mimic the god, they enacted a sacred alchemy, transforming the deceased into a being of light. Other incantations whispered, "Ra's breath fills my throat, his dawn is my heartbeat," blurring the line between mortal and celestial. Here's the genius of these rituals: they didn't rely on brute force. Instead, they used sympathetic magic, by reenacting Osiris' resurrection down to the placement of amulets mimicking his reassembled body. The dead triggered their own rebirth. Some spells even required the deceased to wear a crown of stars, symbolizing their ascent into the imperishable heavens. The most audacious versions of this spell dared to address Ra directly. "You rise, so I rise. You endure, so I endure." This wasn't flattery, it was a declaration of shared divinity, and for those who succeeded, their names would echo alongside the gods, not carved on tombs but woven into the fabric of time. Now, as the final secret of immortality unfolds, one question remains: what price would the ancients pay to claim it? The answer lies in the shadows of the underworld's last unlit chamber. But before the soul could claim divinity, it had to navigate one final celestial test: the hidden power of the northern sky. Unlike the other stars that rose and set, the circumpolar stars never dipped below the horizon. To the Egyptians, these eternal lights were the imperishable ones, a divine council of undying beings. And here's the secret: the dead didn't just admire them, they joined them. Spells from the Book of the Dead reveal how the deceased sought to anchor their bar among the unwearying stars. One incantation declares, "I am a star that circles the thigh of Nut," linking the soul to the sky goddess whose body arched over the earth. Another whispers, "My bones are the iron of the northern sky," transforming decay into cosmic permanence. Why this obsession with the north? It wasn't just about avoiding the Duat's dangers. The circumpolar stars represented a loophole in death itself, a place where time stood still. While Osiris ruled the underworld and Ra journeyed daily, these stars never faltered. By aligning with them, the dead escaped the cycles of decay and rebirth entirely. Priests even oriented tombs northward, ensuring the mummy's gaze fixed on these immortal lights. Amulets shaped like the Meskhetieu constellation, the Egyptian name for the Big Dipper, were placed on the body, literally tying the soul to the stars. And in the darkest hour before dawn, spells promised the dead would hear the imperishable ones calling, "You shall not crumble. You shall not vanish, you are one of us." Yet this celestial immortality came at a price. To dwell among the undying stars meant leaving the earth and its living behind forever. The next secret, however, offers a far more perilous path, a lake where even light could be cut like flesh. But the northern sky wasn't the only challenge awaiting souls in the afterlife. Far below the imperishable stars lay a far more treacherous trial, the Lake of Knives. Picture this, a vast, shimmering expanse where the waters weren't made of liquid, but of razor-sharp blades, each one capable of slicing a soul into oblivion. This wasn't just a physical barrier, it was a test of purity, a divine filter separating the worthy from the doomed. The Book of the Dead reveals how spells acted as a lifeline here. One powerful incantation calls upon Thoth, the god of wisdom, to lay down his bridge of moonlight over the lake. This wasn't a literal structure, but a metaphysical path, a way for the justified dead to walk safely by speaking sacred words that dulled the blades beneath their feet. Another spell warns, "Do not let your shadow touch the water," hinting that even a moment of doubt or impurity could trigger the lake's deadly edge. Why such a brutal obstacle? The Egyptians believed the Lake of Knives served two purposes. First, it destroyed the souls of the wicked. Those whose hearts were heavy with sin would sink instantly, their bar shredded into nothingness. But for the righteous, it was a final purification. Passing over it meant shedding any lingering earthly flaws, emerging on the other side as a spirit refined like gold in a furnace. Some versions of the text even suggest the lake wasn't just a hazard, it was a guardian. Spells describe its blades forming walls to block chaos demons, giving the dead time to recite passwords known only to initiates. And here's the twist: that knives might not have been metal at all. Scholars argue they could symbolize the scorching rays of the sun god Ra, turning the lake into a fiery moat protecting Osiris's throne. Yet survival here demanded more than magic. It required courage. The next secret plunges us deeper into the Duat's shadows, where a mythical book holds power even the gods feared. But courage alone wouldn't unlock the deepest mysteries of the afterlife. Hidden within the whispers of the Duat lies another secret, one so potent that even the gods guarded it jealously. This is the legend of the Book of Thoth, a forbidden text said to contain knowledge beyond mortal comprehension. Imagine a scroll so powerful that merely reading it could grant dominion over the heavens and earth, bending the very fabric of reality to the reader's will. The Book of the Dead hints at fragments of this lost wisdom. Some spells bear striking resemblances to Thoth's mythical teachings, as if scribes borrowed whispers of his divine secrets. For instance, the famed spell for transforming into a heron mirrors legends of Thoth himself taking avian form to traverse realms. Other incantations, like those commanding the elements or silencing enemies, echo tales of the god's mastery over creation and chaos. But why was this book so feared? Ancient myths warn that Thoth's knowledge came at a price. One story tells of a prince who stole the book, only to be cursed with madness and a gruesome fate. Another describes Thoth hiding the text beneath the Nile or within the stars, ensuring only the worthy or the reckless would dare seek it. Scholars speculate that parts of the Book of the Dead, especially the more cryptic spells, might be diluted versions of Thoth's original formulas, sanitized for mortal use. The most chilling rumor that the Book of Thoth contained the true names of every god, demon, and force in existence, knowledge that could unravel Maat itself. This ties back to the Book of the Dead's own emphasis on naming divine beings to wield their power. Yet while the Book of the Dead offered safe passage, Thoth's text promised something far more dangerous: absolute control. And so the mystery lingers. Were these spells gifts from the god of wisdom or fragments of a greater truth too volatile to share? The answer may lie in the next secret, where shadows and light collide in the Duat's most guarded chamber. But the Duat holds more than just legends of forbidden books. Among its winding paths and celestial guardians, another secret slithers into view, one wrapped in scales and sunlight. This is the tale of the serpent Sota, a creature far removed from the chaos of Apophis. Unlike its monstrous counterpart, Sota served as a divine guide, coiled around the solar bark of Ra like a living shield. Picture this: as Ra's boat journeys through the darkest hours of the night, Sota unfurls its luminous body, illuminating the treacherous waters of the underworld. This serpent wasn't just a protector, it was a beacon, its very presence warding off the shadows that sought to devour the sun. Spells from the Book of the Dead invoke Sota's name as a charm against Apophis's venom, calling upon its radiant energy to repel chaos. One such incantation whispers, "Hail, Sota, whose coils shine brighter than the moon. Let your light blind the enemy, let your fangs turn back the storm." What makes Sota so fascinating is its duality. While Apophis represents endless destruction, Sota embodies controlled power, a reminder that not all serpents in Egyptian myth were foes. Some manuscripts even depict Sota spitting fire to cleanse the path ahead, a fiery purifier rather than a bringer of ruin. This symbolism wasn't lost on the ancients. To wear an amulet of Sota was to carry a fragment of Ra's own defense, a tiny spark of the sun's resilience. And here's the hidden key: Sota's role mirrors a deeper truth about the Book of the Dead. Just as this serpent guided Ra through peril, the spells themselves were meant to guide the deceased, lighting their way through the Duat's dangers. The next secret slinks even closer to the heart of this celestial dance, where light and shadow wage their eternal war. Now, let's unravel another layer of Egyptian mysticism, one woven into the very fabric of royal power. The red crown of Lower Egypt and the white crown of Upper Egypt weren't just symbols of earthly rule. In the afterlife, these crowns transformed into divine emblems, granting the deceased the authority of a pharaoh beyond death. Imagine standing in the Hall of Judgment, not as a mere soul, but as a sovereign. Spells from the Book of the Dead reveal how the justified dead could don these crowns, merging the duality of the two lands even in the Duat. One spell declares, "I have placed upon my brow the white crown, shining like the moon. I have fastened the red crown, fierce as the sun's flame. Behold, I am the ruler of the living and the dead." This wasn't mere pageantry, it was a cosmic promotion. By wearing the crowns, the dead claimed kinship with gods like Osiris and Horus, who themselves wore the united peace-shent crown in art and myth. But here's the twist, the crowns also held protective magic. The white crown, linked to the vulture goddess Nekhbit, shielded the wearer from chaos, while the red crown, tied to the cobra Wadjet, spat metaphorical fire at enemies. Together, they formed an unbreakable barrier, much like the unified Egypt they represented. Tomb paintings show the deceased receiving these crowns from deities, a ritual echoing the coronations of living kings. And the deepest secret, the crowns weren't just about power, they were about balance. Just as Upper and Lower Egypt needed each other, the dead had to master both the fiery assertiveness of the red crown and the serene wisdom of the white crown to ascend. This duality mirrors the Book of the Dead's greater lesson. To conquer the afterlife, one had to become whole. As we peel back another mystery, the next secret waits where shadows and light collide in the most unexpected of places. Now, let's step into the shadows of the Duat, where whispers could mean the difference between salvation and doom. Among the Book of the Dead's most cunning spells was a secret incantation designed to silence enemies, both the living and the dead. Imagine facing a vengeful spirit or a rival in the afterlife, their accusations threatening to derail your journey. This spell was your weapon, a verbal shield to mute their threats. One powerful version invoked the metaphor of sealing the mouth of a crocodile, a creature feared for its deadly jaws. The spell declared, "I stitch shut the lips of my foes as the Nile's beast is bound. No word of harm shall cross their tongues, no lie shall take flight." This wasn't just poetic flair. Crocodiles symbolized chaos and deceit in Egyptian mythology, so binding their mouths was akin to stifling chaos itself. The same spell could target human adversaries, ensuring their gossip or curses would never reach the ears of the gods during judgment. But the magic went deeper. Some versions called upon Thoth, the god of wisdom, to still the storm of angry voices, or invoked the quiet authority of Osiris to render enemies mute as the stars. The underlying belief sound held power. A spoken curse could unravel a soul's chances in the afterlife, just as a lie could sway the scales of math. By silencing foes, the dead preserved their truth and their destiny. Archaeologists have found fragments of this spell on amulets, suggesting some carried it as a physical charm. Picture a tiny papyrus scroll tucked into a burial shroud, its words a last line of defense. Yet the most intriguing detail, the spell's flexibility. It could be adapted for specific foes, naming them directly proof that the Egyptians saw the afterlife as a continuation of earthly rivalries. As we uncover these whispered defenses, the next secret beckons, where the dead sought refuge in the wings of a celestial heron. Now let's rise from the shadows of silenced enemies and ascend into the realm of celestial rebirth, where the Bennu bird takes flight. This majestic heron, often perched atop sacred obelisks, wasn't just a symbol of the Nile's life-giving waters. It was Egypt's answer to the phoenix, a creature of eternal renewal. Unlike its fiery Greek counterpart, the Bennu embodied the gentle rise of the sun, its cyclical rebirth mirroring the daily resurrection of Ra. the Book of the Dead reveals spells that wove the deceased soul into the Benu's mythic journey. One incantation proclaims, "I am the Benu, the soul of Ra, who guides the gods. I rise anew each dawn, unbound by death." To speak these words was to claim the bird's power of regeneration, ensuring the dead would awaken refreshed in the field of reeds, just as the sun returned each morning. Archaeologists have found amulets shaped like the Benu in tombs, some inscribed with spells urging it to carry my name to the horizon's edge, a plea for the soul to join the eternal cycle of dawn and dusk. But the connection ran deeper. The Benu was linked to Osiris, its nesting ground said to be the sacred willow tree where the god's body once rested. Spells invoked this bond, with the dead declaring, "Like Osiris in the arms of the Benu, I shall not decay." Here, the bird wasn't just a guide but a guardian of resurrection, its wings shielding the soul from oblivion. Perhaps most striking is how the Benu bridged worlds. While the phoenix myth focused on solitary rebirth, the Egyptian heron was a communal symbol. Spells mention the Benu's flock, suggesting the dead could join a collective ascent, a stark contrast to the lonely trials of the Duat. This wasn't just survival, it was transformation, with the soul shedding its mortal husk as the Benu shed old feathers, ready to greet the new day. As we marvel at this celestial heron's role, another secret awaits where the moon itself becomes a sanctuary for the departed. Leaving the sunlit wings of the Benu behind, we now turn our gaze to the silver glow of Thoth's celestial sanctuary, the mansion of the moon. In the quiet expanse of the night sky, this lunar domain wasn't just a resting place for the moon god. It was a haven of hidden knowledge, a refuge where the dead could escape the perils of the Duat if only they knew the right spells. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, ruled this shimmering realm. Unlike the fiery trials of Ra's solar bark or the shadowed gates of Osiris' underworld, the mansion of the moon offered something rare: clarity. Here, Thoth kept the sacred records of every soul's deeds, weighing words and actions with the precision of a mathematician. Spells from the Book of the Dead implored him directly, with phrases like, "O Thoth, opener of the sky's secrets, let me rest in your mansion of light. Shield me from the storm of demons with your scroll of truth." Archaeologists have found fragments of these incantations on tomb walls, often near depictions of the crescent moon. One spell, etched into a noblewoman's sarcophagus, describes the moon as a boat of silver, carrying the justified dead to Thoth's library of fate. There, they could plead their case anew, presenting their heart's purity not to the fearsome Ammit, but to the calm judgment of the god of wisdom. But the mansion of the moon wasn't just about evasion, it was about enlightenment. Another spell reveals how the dead could drink from Thoth's inkwell, absorbing divine knowledge to navigate the afterlife's labyrinth. This wasn't mere metaphor. Priests buried scribes with lunar amulets, believing Thoth's wisdom would guide their pens even in death. Perhaps most intriguing is how this lunar refuge intersected with time itself. The moon's phases mirrored the cyclical rebirth central to Egyptian belief. A spell from the Ptolemaic era declares, "As you wane and wax, O moon, so shall I fade and flourish." To seek Thoth's mansion was to align with eternity's rhythm, where even the darkest night promised a returning light. As the moon's secrets unfold, another mystery calls, where the blessed dead walk the forbidden path of the Westerners, leaving footprints among the stars. Now we step onto the sacred path known only to the chosen, the forbidden way of the Westerners. This wasn't just a direction on a map, but a divine title reserved for souls who'd passed the weighing of the heart and earned eternal favor. To walk as one of the Westerners meant joining an exalted procession, following the sun god Ra into the afterlife's most guarded realms. The Book of the Dead reveals spells that acted like golden invitations. One, etched into a vizier's tomb, declares, "I am pure, I shine like the imperishable stars. Let me tread the path of the Westerners where no shadow falls." This wasn't mere poetry, it was a desperate plea to avoid the loneliness that awaited failed souls. Egyptians feared isolation in death even more than punishment, believing forgotten spirits withered like unwatered reeds. But how did one become a Westerner? Spells provided the script. Some listed secret names for the Western horizon, calling it the High Hill of Sunset or the Silent Land of Sokar. Others described rituals, placing a clay boat in the tomb to ferry the soul westward, or whispering prayers to Hathor, the cow goddess who welcomed the dead at day's end. A spell from Thebes even instructs the deceased to hold the oar of Ra, symbolizing their right to row alongside gods. Archaeologists found proof of this obsession in the Valley of the Kings. A noble's burial included a painted guide showing the Westerner's route, a winding path past sycamore trees, guarded by jennies holding flickering torches. The accompanying text warns, stray left or right, and the axe spirits will scorn you. Walk straight, and Isis herself will offer you bread. What made this path truly forbidden? Unlike the chaotic Duat where demons lurked, the Westerner's way was orderly but exclusive. Only those who'd mastered spells like I know the gatekeepers of the West could enter. One oversight, one mispronounced deity's name, and the soul risked wandering the desert of the dead, forever hearing the feast songs of the blessed from afar. Yet the boldest souls sought more than inclusion, they craved transformation. A rare spell from the Sate period claims, I will not just walk with the Westerners. I will become the Western horizon. Imagine the audacity, a mortal soul fusing with the boundary between life and death, between day and eternity. As the sun dips below the horizon of history, one last secret calls, where the Eye of Ra blazes with the power to protect or destroy. Now we unveil one of the most potent forces in Egyptian mythology, the blazing Eye of Ra. This isn't the gentle Eye of Horus which heals and restores. No, the Eye of Ra is the sun god's unleashed fury, a cosmic weapon that can scorch enemies to ashes. Imagine a desert storm given divine form, capable of reducing chaos to dust with a single glance. The Book of the Dead holds spells that tap into this terrifying power, but carefully. One warns, call upon the Eye only when your heart is cooler than the Nile's depths. Why such caution? Because while the Eye of Horus represents the moon's soothing light, the Eye of Ra is the noonday sun at its most merciless. Ancient texts describe it as a sentient force, sometimes taking the form of the lioness goddess Sekhmet, who once nearly wiped out humanity in a rampage of fire. Yet for those who dared, the rewards were immense. A priest's scroll from Memphis details a spell where the deceased declares, I wear the Eye of Ra as my crown, and its flames become my shield. This wasn't just metaphor. Tomb paintings show the eye as a literal ring of fire around favored souls, incinerating underworld demons who drew near. Archaeologists found amulets shaped like the solar disk with protruding rays designed to channel this protection. The duality of the eye fascinates scholars. In one spell, it's called the Mother Who Births Justice, referring to how Ra used it to burn corrupt souls during the weighing of the heart. But another passage describes it as the serpent who spits venom at the unjust, linking it to the cobra goddess Wadjet. This versatility made it the ultimate divine weapon, destructive yet purifying, lethal yet life-giving when controlled. Perhaps the boldest invocation comes from a Theban queen's sarcophagus. Let the Eye of Ra blaze before me, but let its heat warm rather than wither me. This delicate balance, harnessing the sun's wrath without being consumed by it, was the pinnacle of Egyptian magical mastery. To wield the eye's power was to dance at the edge of a volcano, trusting the gods to keep you from falling in. And as the sun sets on this secret, one truth remains. In the hands of the righteous, even destruction could become a form of salvation. Now we arrive at the ultimate revelation, the crowning secret of the Book of the Dead, how the righteous could transcend mortality and become gods themselves. This wasn't mere symbolism or wishful thinking. The ancient Egyptians believed that through precise rituals and sacred spells, a purified soul could achieve divine union, merging with the very deities who ruled the cosmos. Picture this moment of transformation. After passing the weighing of the heart and navigating the Duat's trials, the justified dead stood before Osiris not as supplicants but as equals. Spells like those in chapter 17 declare, "I am Osiris, my limbs are the limbs of the Eternal One." These words weren't poetic flattery, they were magical formulas collapsing the boundary between human and God. Tomb texts describe the deceased wearing the Eight of Crown, traditionally reserved for Osiris, while uttering, "I have grasped the scepter of millions of years." But Osiris wasn't the only path to divinity. Some spells invited the dead to join Ra's solar bark, becoming one with the sun's eternal cycle. A priest's papyrus from Abydos reveals the ultimate ambition. "My soul is the falcon who soars beside Ra. My voice is the wind that fills his sails." This wasn't just riding with the gods, it was becoming part of their essence. Archaeologists found mummies wrapped in gold-leafed shrouds, their skin shimmering like the sun's surface, a physical echo of this celestial ascent. The most daring spells even allowed the dead to assume multiple divine forms. One spell from the Ptolemaic era proclaims, "I am Horus by day, Thoth by night, and Khepri at dawn." This shape-shifting divinity mirrored the gods' own fluid identities, granting the deceased power over every realm of existence. Wall paintings in the Valley of the Kings show the dead seated beside Anubis or Hathor, not as worshippers but as fellow deities sharing in offerings. Yet this apotheosis came with solemn responsibility. A text from the Temple of Edfu warns, "To wear the god's face is to bear the god's duty." The newly divine soul became a guardian of Maat, tasked with sustaining cosmic order just as Osiris and Ra did. This was immortality with purpose, an eternal role in the universe's balance. And so, the Book of the Dead's final secret unfolds. Death wasn't an end, but a doorway. For those who lived justly, mastered the spells, and kept their hearts lighter than Maat's feather, the afterlife offered the unimaginable, a throne among the stars, and a name that would echo forever in the halls of the gods. And so we reach the end of our journey through the Book of the Dead's most profound mysteries. From the true name of this ancient guide to the ultimate secret of divine ascension, we've uncovered how these 50 revelations formed a roadmap to eternity. Each spell, ritual, and symbol served a purpose, whether helping souls navigate the underworld's dangers, outwit demonic gatekeepers, or stand triumphant before Osiris himself. The Book of the Dead's influence stretches far beyond the sands of Egypt. Its imagery echoes in modern films, books, and games, from Hollywood's mummy tales to fantasy lore about weighing souls. Spiritual seekers still study its wisdom, finding timeless truths about morality, transformation, and what lies beyond death. Even our concept of judgment in the afterlife, the idea that our deeds are weighed, traces back to those vivid scenes with Anubis and the feather of Maat. But here's what truly endures. The Egyptians didn't see death as an ending. For them, it was a passage to something greater, a chance to join the cosmic dance of gods and stars. The Book of the Dead was their instruction manual for immortality, not just surviving the afterlife, but thriving in it with purpose and power. Now we turn to you. Which of these 50 secrets resonated most? Was it the dramatic weighing of the heart, the hidden maps of the Duat, or the shocking truth about becoming a god? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear which mysteries captured your imagination. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed unraveling these ancient truths, and subscribe to uncover more hidden chapters of history. Until next time, keep exploring the secrets of the past.